The wind howled through the frozen mountains, carrying with it the sound of loneliness. Snow fell endlessly, turning the world white and silent. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and even the strongest souls avoided being outside that night. But one man was still on the road. Jack Harris, a former Navy SEAL. His truck moved slowly through the storm, headlights cutting through thick sheets of snow. Jack's face was calm but alert. He had been trained to face danger, but nature always demanded respect. He had spent years in war zones, deserts, and jungles. But tonight it was the cold that tested him. His mind was tired, his body sore from long travel. He was heading home after months away, home to peace, or at least that's what he hoped. The radio cracked weakly with a weather warning. Heavy snow expected. Avoid travel if possible, Jack sighed. Too late for that, he muttered. He turned down a narrow forest road, where tall pine trees bent under the weight of snow. His truck tires crunched through the icy ground. For miles there was nothing, no light, no sound, just the endless white storm. Then suddenly, something caught his eye, a faint flash of red through the trees. He slowed down, squinting. It wasn't just snow or shadow. It was something else. Jack stopped the truck, opened the door, and stepped out into the freezing air. The cold bit into his skin instantly. The snow was deep, almost to his knees. He moved toward the red light, fighting the wind that pushed against him. As he got closer, his heart started to beat faster. It was a police car, half buried in snow, its red emergency lights blinking weakly through the storm. The engine was off. The windshield was cracked. Something was wrong. Jack moved closer, brushing snow from the driver's window. Inside, the seats were empty. The door was open slightly, swinging in the wind. He saw marks in the snow, footsteps, then drag marks leading away from the car, and then he heard it, a low, painful sound. A whimper. Jack turned sharply. It came from behind the car, a faint movement in the snow. He stepped closer, heart pounding. There, lying on the ground, was a woman in a police uniform. Her body was half covered in snow, her lips blue, her face pale. She wasn't moving. Beside her was a dog, shivering violently, pressing against her as if trying to keep her warm. The animal looked weak but refused to leave her side. Jack's instincts took over. He knelt beside her, brushing snow from her face. "Hey, can you hear me?" he said loudly. No answer. He checked her neck and a faint pulse. Barely there. He noticed something that made his blood run cold. Her hands were tied behind her back with a piece of rope. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this to her. Jack looked around. Nothing but the storm. No one else in sight. The forest was silent, hiding its secrets under the snow. The dog growled softly at first, protecting her, but Jack spoke calmly. "It's okay, boy. I'm here to help." The dog stared at him, unsure, then let out a weak bark, almost as if agreeing to trust him. Jack quickly cut the rope with his knife and lifted the woman carefully into his arms. She was freezing cold, her uniform stiff with ice. The dog followed closely, limping through the snow. Jack carried her back to his truck, laid her gently in the back seat, and turned the heater to full. He wrapped her in his military jacket. He looked at the badge on her chest. "Officer Grace Miller," Jack frowned. "A lone police officer in the middle of a storm, tied up and left to die?" It didn't make sense. He turned back toward the road, but the snow was falling harder now, blocking everything. Driving further was too dangerous. His cabin was just a few miles away. That was the only option. He started the engine and whispered, "Hang in there, officer. Don't you give up on me now." The truck moved slowly through the storm, the sound of the engine echoing through the emptiness. The dog lay beside Grace, eyes on her face, whimpering softly, as if begging her to stay alive. After what felt like hours, Jack finally saw the outline of his cabin, a small wooden shelter hidden among the trees. He parked quickly, opened the door, and carried Grace inside. The warmth of the cabin hit them instantly. Jack laid her near the fireplace, lighting the fire until the room glowed with orange light. He rubbed her hands, trying to get her blood moving again. The dog sat beside her, refusing to rest. Jack poured a bowl of water and placed it near the dog, who licked it eagerly. Minutes passed. The fire crackled. Slowly, Color began to return to Grace's face. Her lips moved slightly. Jack leaned closer, hoping to hear something. Her voice was barely a whisper. He's still out there. Jack froze. He leaned in again. Who? Who's out there? But Grace had already fallen unconscious again. The wind howled outside, shaking the cabin walls. Jack looked toward the window, darkness everywhere. He stood there for a moment, staring into the storm, feeling that same old instinct from his days as a SEAL. Someone was watching, and somewhere out there in the blizzard, the danger that left this woman to die was still out there. The fire burned bright inside the small cabin. The sound of wind outside was loud and angry, shaking the windows. But inside it was warm, almost safe. Jack Harris sat beside the woman, watching her face closely. Her skin was still pale, her lips trembling slightly as her body tried to fight the cold. Her clothes were wet, so Jack carefully covered her with a thick blanket. The dog sat next to her, eyes never leaving her face. Jack had seen loyalty before, in soldiers, in brothers. But this animal's loyalty was different. It was deep, pure, and desperate. Jack spoke softly. "You've done good, boy. You saved her life." The dog tilted its head as if it understood. Jack stood up, poured some warm water into a bowl, and placed it beside them. Then he prepared a small cup of hot tea. He had learned in the military that warmth was more powerful than medicine in moments like this. After a while, the woman's fingers moved slightly. Jack leaned closer. Her eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes were tired, confused. She looked around. The wooden cabin, the fire, the strange man beside her. Panic flashed in her eyes. Where am I?" she whispered, her voice rough and weak. "You're safe," Jack said calmly. "You were in the snow. I found you near your car. You were almost frozen." She blinked, trying to remember. Then suddenly fear spread across her face. She tried to sit up but fell back, breathing fast. "Easy," Jack said quickly. "You're still weak. You need to rest." Her eyes darted around, searching. "Shadow, where's my dog?" The dog barked softly and came closer, licking her hand. Relief flooded her face as she smiled weakly. "Good boy. You stayed with me." Jack waited for her to calm down before asking gently, "What happened out there?" She stared into the fire for a long moment, as if deciding whether to speak. Finally she whispered, Someone left me to die." Jack frowned. "Your hands were tied. I saw the rope." She nodded slowly, tears forming in her eyes. "I was chasing a suspect, a man named Victor Kane. He's dangerous. He knows things. He's done terrible things." Her voice shook as she continued. "He trapped me. He took my gun, my radio. I thought he was going to shoot me. But instead, he tied me up and left me in the snow. He said no one would find me there." Jack's expression hardened. The name sounded familiar, too familiar. Victor Kane. It echoed in his mind like a ghost from his past. He had heard that name years ago during a mission overseas, a soldier turned criminal, someone who disappeared after betraying his own team. Jack clenched his jaw, but stayed silent. Grace looked at him, her voice faint. "You shouldn't have stopped for me. If he knows I'm alive, he'll come back." Jack shook his head firmly. "Then let him come. He won't find you easily." She tried to smile, but her exhaustion took over. "You don't know him. He doesn't stop until everyone is gone." Jack stood up, looking out the window. Snow was still falling heavily, covering the tracks outside. "Then he's already too late," he said quietly. "The storm's covering his trail. You're safe for now." The room fell quiet, except for the crackling of the fire. Grace closed her eyes again, this time not from fear, but from pure exhaustion. Jack turned back to the dog. "Shadow, huh?" The dog looked at him and wagged its tail once. "All right, Shadow. Looks like we're in this together." Hours passed. The storm showed no sign of stopping. Jack took his old radio from the shelf and tried to reach someone. No signal. The storm was blocking all lines. He sighed and looked back at Grace. Her breathing was steadier now. She looked peaceful, but he knew peace never lasted long. He cleaned the cuts on her wrists where the rope had burned her skin, then checked her temperature. Slowly, warmth returned to her hands. When she woke again, she looked at him more clearly. You're not a cop," she said. Jack smiled faintly. "No, not anymore at least. Navy SEAL, retired." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. That explains the calm voice. He chuckled softly. You learn to stay calm when bullets start flying. For the first time, she smiled. But then her face grew serious again. He has files, Victor. He's not just some criminal. He's working with people inside the system. Police, politicians, maybe even the military. Jack's eyes narrowed. And you found proof? Grace nodded weakly. On a flash drive. But I dropped it when he caught me. Jack's instincts came alive. Where? In my car, maybe. I don't remember. I just ran before he tied me. Jack looked toward the door, the snow still falling hard. He knew what he had to do. Go back out there and find that flash drive before someone else did. He turned to Grace. Rest. I'll check your car. No, she said quickly, fear flashing in her eyes. He could still be out there. Jack met her gaze. If he is, he won't catch me by surprise. Trust me, Shadow barked once, as if agreeing. Jack put on his heavy jacket, loaded his old rifle, and grabbed a flashlight. As he opened the cabin door, cold air rushed in. He looked back once more. Grace, watching him silently, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. I'll be back, Jack said, his voice steady. Lock the door behind me. Then he stepped into the storm, disappearing into the white darkness. Inside, Grace held Shadow close, whispering, Please bring him back safe. The fire flickered, the wind roared, and somewhere far in the snowy forest danger was waiting. The wind was sharp, like blades cutting through the air. Snow fell heavier now, making it almost impossible to see beyond a few feet. Jack Harris moved slowly through the blizzard, his flashlight trembling in his gloved hand. Every breath came out like white smoke. His boots crunched through the deep snow, following the faint marks he remembered from before. Somewhere ahead, under a blanket of ice, was the broken police car, and maybe the answers Grace had risked her life for. He whispered to himself, Come on, Harris, just a little more. Finally, through the swirling snow, he saw the red light again, the half-buried police car. It looked lifeless, like a forgotten grave. The door still hung open, frozen in place. Jack brushed off the snow and leaned inside. The cold air inside the car felt like a tomb. He turned his flashlight around, searching carefully. The front seat was covered in shattered glass. Blood on the steering wheel. A bullet hole in the windshield. Jack frowned. So it wasn't just an accident. He checked under the seat in the glove compartment. Nothing. Then his eyes fell on a small crack between the front seats. Something metallic was wedged deep inside. He reached in, forcing it loose. It was a USB flash drive, black and scratched, with the letters VK01 engraved on it. Jack held it up, the light reflecting off its surface. This must be it, he muttered, but just as he started to leave, a sound made him freeze. Crunch, footsteps, slow, heavy, getting closer. Jack turned off his flashlight and crouched low beside the car, blending into the darkness. The storm's noise almost covered it, but not completely. Another step, then another. He could barely see a shadow moving through the snow. Tall, broad shoulders. Whoever it was, they were searching. Jack's hand moved silently to his sidearm. His heartbeat slowed, the old SEAL instincts kicking in. The figure came closer, scanning the area with a faint flashlight beam. For a second, it passed over the car, and Jack saw the face clearly, a man with a deep scar running down his cheek. Cold eyes, Victor Kane. Jack's blood ran cold. It had been years, but he remembered that face from the battlefield. The same man responsible for the death of 2 of his teammates. So it was true. Victor hadn't disappeared. He had just changed his war. Jack stayed silent, barely breathing. Victor walked closer to the car, his boots sinking into the snow. He spoke softly, as if talking to himself. You should have died, Officer Miller. I don't like unfinished work. Jack's grip tightened on his gun. Victor kicked the snow near the driver's door, scanning the ground. Then, after a few seconds, he turned back toward the woods. Jack waited until the sound of footsteps faded completely before moving again. His breath came fast, fogging up the inside of his mask. He looked at the flash drive in his hand. So this is what you're killing people for? Without wasting time, Jack began the long walk back to his cabin. The snow felt thicker now, heavier, as if the storm itself wanted to bury every trace of what happened. Back at the cabin, Grace sat up when she heard the door open. Her face was pale, but her eyes filled with relief when she saw Jack. Shadow barked once, his tail wagging. Jack closed the door quickly, brushing snow off his jacket. "He's out there," he said immediately. Grace's expression froze. "Victor?" Jack nodded. "I saw him near your car." "You were right. He's not done." She swallowed hard, her hands trembling slightly. "Did you find anything?" Jack held up the small black flash drive. "This." Grace stared at it like it was something dangerous. "That's the proof," she said quietly. "The files contain names, officers, businessmen, and government people who worked with him. I found them during an investigation, but when I tried to expose it, they came after me." Jack placed the flash drive on the table near the fire. "So this is why he left you to die?" Grace nodded. "If those names go public, a lot of powerful people will fall. That's why I couldn't trust anyone, not even my department." Jack sat down across from her. His expression was calm, but inside his mind was racing. He had spent years fighting wars overseas. Now it felt like the war had come home, and it was dirtier than anything he'd seen before. He looked into the fire. "You said he's working with people inside the system. You think they'll come looking for him?" Grace shook her head. "No, they'll come looking for me. They probably already know I'm still alive." Jack rubbed his forehead. "Then we need a plan. We can't stay here long." The room went silent for a while. Only the sound of the crackling fire filled the air. Grace looked at Jack seriously. "Why are you helping me?" He looked at her for a moment, then answered quietly, "Because I've met Victor before. Long ago, he killed people I served with. I never got the chance to stop him. Maybe now I can." Her eyes widened. You knew him?" Jack nodded slowly. "He was one of us once, a soldier, until he sold his team for money and ran. We thought he was dead. Guess we were wrong." Grace looked at him, realizing this wasn't just her fight anymore. It was his, too. Jack stood, checking his rifle. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we move before the snow clears. If he finds this cabin, we won't get a second chance." Grace nodded, petting Shadow's head as the dog lay beside her. "What if he finds us?" Jack gave a small, grim smile. "Then he finds me first." Outside, the storm finally began to quiet. But inside the cabin, tension grew stronger. The truth was out, and both of them knew it was only a matter of time before danger came knocking again. And somewhere deep in the forest, Victor Kane was already making his next move. The storm had slowed by morning. The world outside the cabin was silent, covered in a thick, shining blanket of white snow. Smoke rose softly from the chimney as the fire inside continued to burn. Grace sat near the window, watching the sunlight reflect off the snow. It was peaceful, too peaceful. After everything that happened, she didn't trust silence anymore. Jack poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to her. "You look better today," he said quietly. Grace nodded, holding the warm cup between her hands. "Thanks to you and Shadow." She smiled faintly at the dog lying near her feet. Jack sat down across from her, studying her face. "You should rest. You've been through hell." Grace shook her head. "No, if we want to stop him, I need to tell you everything. You deserve to know." Jack leaned back in his chair. "All right, start from the beginning." Grace took a deep breath, her eyes distant, remembering. "Victor Kane wasn't always a criminal," she began. "He used to be a decorated soldier. Brave, smart, respected. But something changed after his last mission overseas. He came back a different man. Cold, angry, and full of secrets." Jack listened quietly, every word pulling him deeper into her story. "He was supposed to retire," Grace continued. "Instead, he built a secret network. He used his military connections to smuggle weapons and people, women, children. He sold them like they were objects." Her voice broke slightly. "At first, no one believed me. Everyone said I was crazy to accuse someone like him. So I started investigating in secret. I followed the money. That's when I found the names. Officers, politicians, people high up in the system. Victor wasn't working alone. He was protected." Jack's jaw tightened. "Protected by the people who should have stopped him." Grace nodded. "Yes, I collected all the evidence. I had enough to bring him down. But someone leaked my investigation. He found out before I could act. He came to my house. I fought him off and ran, but he caught me on the road. He tied me up, left me in the snow, and said, 'Let's see if justice can survive the cold.' Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I thought that was the end, but then you showed up." Jack looked into the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "I remember him now," he said quietly. "Victor was part of a special ops unit, mine. We trusted him. One night during a mission, he turned on us, sold our coordinates to the enemy for money. 2 of my men died because of him." Grace looked shocked. "So you already had a reason to stop him?" Jack nodded slowly. "I thought I buried that part of my life. But it looks like fate doesn't like leaving things unfinished." For a few moments, they both sat in silence, the fire crackling softly. Shadow rested his head on Grace's knee, sensing her pain. Grace broke the silence first. "He won't stop, Jack. If he knows I'm alive, he'll come for me. And for you." Jack gave a small, cold smile. "Then he'll find something he didn't expect. Someone ready for him this time." He stood up and began checking his gear, loading bullets, sharpening his knife, checking his radio. Grace watched him, curious. "You still keep your SEAL training alive, huh?" she said softly. Jack smiled slightly. "Some habits never die." Grace hesitated, then asked, "Why did you come here, Jack?" "This cabin. This place." Jack looked around the small cabin. "After the war, I needed somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one could find me. I was tired of fighting." He looked at her and said, "Funny thing, though, the fight always finds you when you try to run from it." Grace nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what makes people like us different. We don't look for trouble, but we don't walk away either." Jack chuckled softly. "Guess you're right." As the day passed, the storm cleared completely. The forest stood still, beautiful and deadly at the same time. Jack opened the door slightly and stepped outside to check the tracks. He froze. Fresh footprints. They weren't there last night. They led toward the woods, and back again. Someone had been watching. Jack returned inside, locking the door quickly. His voice was calm but sharp. "We're not alone." Someone was near the cabin. Grace's heart jumped. "Victor?" "Could be," Jack said, checking his rifle. "Or one of his men. Either way, they know you're alive." Shadow began growling near the door, his fur standing. Grace stood up shakily. "What do we do now?" Jack moved to the window, eyes scanning the tree line. "We prepare. If they come here, they'll regret it." He turned to her, voice firm but calm. "You trust me?" Grace nodded without hesitation. "With my life." "Good," Jack said. "Then we'll make our stand here tonight." The sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of red and gold. The quiet forest hid danger behind its beauty. Inside the cabin, Jack checked the perimeter while Grace loaded a pistol he had given her. Shadow stayed alert near the window. The air was thick with tension, calm before the storm. Grace looked at Jack one last time. "If we survive this, what then?" Jack didn't answer for a moment. He looked out at the trees. The same trees where death might be waiting. Then he said softly, "Then maybe we both finally get to live." The last light of the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and darkness returned. The night was coming, and with it the past that refused to die. The night was cold and silent, too silent. Even the wind had stopped whispering through the trees. The only sound inside the cabin was the faint crackle of fire and the steady breathing of 2 people preparing for what might be their last stand. Jack sat near the window, his rifle resting across his knees. His eyes moved constantly, scanning the shadows outside. Grace sat on the floor beside Shadow, holding the pistol Jack had given her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were focused and brave. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. Each second felt louder than the last. Jack finally spoke.
"They're close."
"I can feel it." Grace swallowed hard.
"How many, you think?"
Jack shook his head.
"Doesn't matter."
"We only need to survive until morning." He stood up and checked the back door, making sure it was barricaded with wood and furniture. Grace watched him move, calm, precise, trained. He had done this before many times, but this time felt different. This time he wasn't fighting for a mission. He was fighting for someone. Shadow suddenly lifted his head and growled low. Jack froze. They're here. He motioned for Grace to stay low. Slowly, he peeked through a crack in the curtain. Through the trees, he saw them. 3 dark figures moving quietly through the snow. Each carried a weapon. Their movements were careful, professional. Jack whispered, "Victor's men." Grace's heart raced. She held the pistol tighter, whispering, "What do we do?" Jack's eyes never left the window. "We make them believe this cabin will be their grave." The first shot came suddenly. Crack! Shattering the window beside them. Glass sprayed across the floor as Grace ducked down, gasping, "Stay down!" Jack shouted, pulling her behind the couch. Another shot hit the wall. Wood splintered near Jack's head. He aimed his rifle and fired back once. Bang! The echo rolling through the forest. One of the men outside dropped instantly. The other 2 took cover behind the trees. Jack breathed deeply, focusing. To left. Grace peeked out for a second and saw shadows moving closer. "They're trying to surround us," she said. Jack nodded. "Let them. They'll wish they hadn't." He moved quickly to the back of the cabin, opening a small window near the kitchen. He tossed something out, a smoke grenade he had kept for emergencies. Within seconds, thick grey smoke spread through the snowy field outside. The attackers began coughing, disoriented. That was Jack's moment. He opened the door, rolled out silently, and disappeared into the smoke. Grace waited, her heart pounding. She couldn't see him anymore. "Jack," she whispered. "Where are you?" No answer, only the sound of distant movement and muffled gunfire. In the chaos outside, Jack moved like a ghost. The smoke covered his path. He circled behind one of the men, catching him off guard. A quick strike, a quiet fall. Now only one remained. The last man stood near the front porch, shouting, "Harris! I know you're out here." Jack stayed hidden, listening. Then through the clearing smoke, he saw a faint red laser dot moving along the cabin wall. The man had night vision. Jack steadied his rifle, aimed carefully, and fired. Bang! The man fell, his weapon slipping from his hands, landing in the snow. Silence returned. Only the fire from the cabin flickered faintly through the smoke. Jack lowered his rifle, breathing heavily. The adrenaline still rushed through his veins. He looked at the 3 motionless bodies, his expression hard but sad. "Didn't have to be this way," he whispered. He turned back toward the cabin. Inside, Grace jumped when the door opened suddenly. But when she saw Jack, relief flooded her face. "You're okay." Jack nodded, closing the door behind him. "It's over." For now, she looked at the floor, her eyes wet. "You could have died out there." Jack shrugged slightly, a faint smile crossing his lips. "It wouldn't be the first time." Grace stood and walked closer to him. "You don't have to risk your life for me." He looked at her for a long moment. "You're not the only one who wants Victor stopped. This isn't just your fight anymore." She nodded slowly. "Then we finish it together." Jack picked up the flash drive from the table. "This is the key. We get this to the right people and Victor loses everything." Grace's expression hardened. "He won't let that happen. He'll come himself next time." Jack looked at her, determination in his eyes. "Then let him come." The rest of the night passed in silence. Jack buried the men in the snow far from the cabin. No need to leave evidence behind. When he came back inside, Grace was sitting near the fire with Shadow asleep beside her. She looked up at him and asked softly, "Do you ever get tired of fighting?" Jack paused before answering. "Every day. But some fights are worth it." She gave a small, sad smile. "And this one?" He looked into her eyes. "This one is personal." Outside, the sky began to glow faintly with dawn. But somewhere beyond the horizon, Victor Kane was already on his way. And this time, he wouldn't send his men. He was coming himself. The morning sun rose weak and cold over the white forest. The storm had passed, but the danger hadn't. Jack stood outside the cabin, watching the endless line of trees, his breath turning into small clouds of fog. The night's battle still echoed in his mind. The gunfire, the smoke, the silence afterward. He had survived, but he knew this was only the beginning. Inside, Grace was packing the few things they had left: food, medicine, and the flash drive. Shadow followed her closely, sensing her worry. "Jack," she said softly from the doorway, "we should move." "They'll find us again." Jack nodded slowly. "You're right. But before we go, I want to make sure no one else is out there." He scanned the woods one last time, but something in the distance caught his eye. A black SUV, half buried in snow, its engine still running. His stomach tightened. He turned to Grace. "He's here." They barely had time to react before the silence broke. The sound of crunching snow echoed closer. Jack grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, while Grace crouched behind the table, holding her pistol, then put a voice, deep, calm, too familiar. "Jack Harris." Jack froze. The voice came again, clearer this time. "It's been a long time, brother." Grace's eyes widened. "Victor," she whispered. Jack's jaw clenched. He slowly stepped toward the door, his rifle ready. "Stay inside," he said to Grace. "No, Jack, please," he interrupted firmly. "If he came here himself, it's not just to kill. He wants something." He opened the door slowly, the freezing wind hitting his face. Victor Kane stood a few meters away, tall and calm, wearing a dark coat. Snowflakes landed on his scarred face, but he didn't seem to notice. Behind him, 2 armed men stood silently. Jack raised his rifle slightly. "You're a long way from your empire, Victor." Victor smiled faintly. "Empire? No, Jack, I'm just a businessman now. You, on the other hand, still trying to play the hero." Jack didn't respond. His finger rested lightly on the trigger. Victor took a few steps closer, hands open. "You've aged, my friend." "Still fighting ghosts?" "Only one," Jack said coldly. Victor chuckled softly. "You always were the stubborn one. I remember the day you tried to stop me. You failed then. You'll fail now." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You killed good men, Victor. You betrayed everything we stood for." Victor shrugged. "I adapted. You call it betrayal, I call it survival." Jack took a step forward. "And Grace, you call what you did to her survival too?" Victor's smile faded slightly. "Ah, Officer Miller. Brave girl. She saw too much, found things that didn't belong to her. You should have stayed out of this, Jack. She's already marked for death, and now you are too." Jack raised his weapon. "Then finish it." Victor tilted his head. "You think this is how it ends? In the snow, like animals?" "No, Jack, I'm giving you a choice. Hand her over, give me the flash drive, and you walk away. No one will ever find you." Jack stared at him. "You really think I'd trade a woman's life for peace?" Victor's smile returned, cruel and cold. "I think you're tired, Jack. You've been running for years. Don't tell me you're still chasing honor. There's no honor left in this world." Jack's voice hardened. "Maybe not. But there's still right and wrong." Victor sighed. "Then you've chosen death." He raised his hand slightly, a signal. Before Jack could move, the sound of gunfire exploded through the air. Bullets ripped through the cabin walls. Grace screamed and ducked down, pulling Shadow with her. Jack dove behind a tree, firing back. The snow burst around him as bullets struck the ground. The 2 men with Victor moved in fast, covering both sides of the cabin. Jack shouted, "Grace, stay down!" She crawled toward the back door, gripping her pistol tightly. Her heart pounded, her hands shaking, but she wasn't going to hide forever. When one of Victor's men kicked open the door, Grace was waiting. She fired. Bang! And the man fell instantly. Jack saw it from outside and yelled, "Good shot!" Victor turned sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. "You trained her?" Jack smirked. "She learns fast." Victor grabbed the other man's rifle and began firing toward Jack's position. Jack returned fire, both of them exchanging shots through the swirling snow. The sound was deafening. The quiet forest was now a battlefield again. Finally, Victor's gun clicked, empty. Jack stepped out from behind the tree, gun aimed directly at him. "Drop it, Victor!" Jack shouted. Victor raised his hand slowly, smiling. "You really think killing me will change anything?" "The people on that flash drive, they own the system. I'm just the face of it." Jack kept his aim steady. "Then I'll start with the face." Before he could shoot, a sudden bark broke the tension. Shadow rushed out of the cabin, growling fiercely. Victor turned just enough to throw Jack's aim off. 2 shots fired, 1 from each man. Jack's bullet grazed Victor's shoulder. Victor's shot hit the ground near Shadow, sending snow flying. The dog barked louder, protecting Grace, who ran out behind him. "Jack, stop!" Grace shouted. "He's not worth it." Victor looked at her, pain flashing across his face for the first time. Blood dripped from his shoulder. "You think you've won?" he said quietly. You don't even know what's coming." He turned and limped toward the SUV. Jack aimed again, but Grace placed her hand on his arm. "Let him go," she said softly. "Not now," Jack hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon. Victor climbed into the SUV, smirking through the open door. "You can't hide forever, Jack. The storm's not over." The engine roared, and the car disappeared into the white forest, leaving silence behind once more. Jack stood still, snow melting on his face. Grace looked at him, her voice trembling. "Why did you let him go?" Jack's eyes were cold. "Because I need him to lead us to everyone else." He turned back toward the cabin. "This isn't over, Grace. It's just beginning." The snow outside had stopped falling, but the world still looked frozen, quiet, tense, waiting. Inside the small cabin, Grace and Jack sat beside the fire, both staring at the small black flash drive lying on the table. For a moment, no one spoke. The tiny object seemed harmless, but both of them knew what it carried inside could destroy powerful people. Or destroy them. Grace broke the silence first. "This little thing. It's what he's killing people for." Jack nodded slowly. "Yeah, let's see what's inside before he comes back." He took his laptop out of his backpack and connected the flash drive. The screen flickered for a moment, then showed a list of encrypted files. Each file had strange names: Project Northwind, Operation Whitestone, Omega Contacts. Grace leaned closer. "That's it. That's what I found in his house. Each project name is a cover for something illegal. Trafficking, money laundering, smuggling, everything." Jack started opening one of the folders. Inside were dozens of documents, photos, and payment records. He scrolled through them, his face tightening with each new file. "God," he whispered, "these aren't just random names. These are government contracts, signed by generals, senators, even defense companies." Grace nodded. "That's why he said I couldn't expose him." "He's not working for them, Jack. He's working with them." Jack sat back, running a hand over his face. "So he's not just a criminal. He's part of a system built on corruption." Grace stared at the screen, her voice low. "I told my chief about this once. 2 days later I was suspended for misconduct, and that same night my house was broken into." Jack's jaw clenched. "They wanted to erase you," Grace nodded. "But I made a backup. I sent a copy of these files to someone I trusted. My old mentor, Captain Ross." Jack looked at her sharply. "Where is he now?" She hesitated. "He disappeared a few weeks after I sent it." The silence that followed was heavy. Only the soft crackle of fire broke it. Finally, Jack said quietly, "We can't keep this here. If Victor's working with these people, he'll send more men, or worse." Grace looked at him. "Then where do we go?" Jack thought for a moment. "There's a safe house, old Navy property about 30 miles from here. I can get us there, but we'll need to move fast before dawn." Grace nodded. "Then we go tonight." They packed quickly: weapons, food, the laptop, and the flash drive. Grace dressed warmly, checking her gun once more. Shadow barked softly, as if sensing what was coming. As they stepped outside, the air was cold and sharp. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Jack looked around carefully before they started walking. Snow crunched beneath their boots as they made their way through the woods. The moon hung low, lighting their path faintly. For a long time, neither of them spoke. They were both thinking about what they had seen, the names, the crimes, the betrayal. Finally, Grace broke the silence. "Do you ever wonder why people like Victor never stop? They already have money, power. Why do they keep doing it?" Jack glanced at her. "Because it's not about money anymore. It's about control. Once you taste that, it's hard to let go." Grace nodded slowly. "I used to believe justice always wins. Now I'm not sure." Jack's voice softened. "It still can. Sometimes it just needs people crazy enough to fight for it." She smiled faintly. "Then I guess we're both crazy." Jack smiled too. "Yeah, maybe that's what keeps us alive." Hours passed as they walked through the forest, guided only by Jack's compass and instinct. But just as they reached the edge of a frozen lake, Grace suddenly stopped. "Jack!" "Wait!" He turned quickly. "What is it?" She pointed at the snow. "Fresh tire tracks." Jack's expression hardened. "They found us again." He looked around. The area was open, no good cover. They were exposed. "Come on," he said quickly. "Across the lake." It'll slow them down. They started running, their boots slipping on the icy surface. The cold air cut their faces, and Shadow ran beside them, barking nervously. Behind them, headlights appeared between the trees. 2 black SUVs speeding toward the lake. "Jack!" Grace shouted. "They're close!" Jack grabbed her hand. "Keep moving!" Bullets started hitting the ice, echoing like thunder. Cracks spread across the frozen surface beneath their feet. "Don't stop!" Jack shouted. They reached the other side, diving behind a fallen tree. Jack turned and fired a few shots, hitting one of the SUV's tires. The vehicle swerved and crashed into the snowbank. The second SUV stopped, and 4 men jumped out, guns raised. Jack reloaded quickly. "They're not stopping this time." Grace fired too, her aim steady despite the fear. The forest filled with the sound of gunfire again. When the shooting finally stopped, 2 of the attackers lay motionless. The others ran back toward the trees. Jack looked at Grace. "You okay?" She nodded, breathing hard. "I think so." He checked her shoulder. "A small cut, nothing serious." "Good. Let's move before they regroup." They continued walking, but both of them knew the truth. This was no longer about survival. It was war. A few hours later, they reached an abandoned cabin near the edge of the mountains. Jack checked it carefully before leading Grace inside. Grace sat down, exhausted, while Jack connected the flash drive again. "We'll copy everything," he said. "Then we send it to every news outlet and law enforcement agency we can reach." Grace looked at him, her voice shaky. "If we do that, they'll come after us, everyone." Jack looked at her calmly. "Then we'll make sure they can't find us first." But before he could continue, a faint sound made them both freeze. A slow clap from behind them. They turned. Standing in the doorway, smiling, was Victor Kane, his coat torn, his face bruised, but his eyes full of cold rage. "Well done," he said softly. "You brought me right to it." Grace's heart stopped. "How did you—" Victor lifted his phone. "You should have checked for trackers, Officer Miller." Jack's hand went for his gun. Victor raised his weapon first. The final showdown had begun.